We're starting from the Mishnah on Lamed Daled on the Beis just so that we can get our bearings. Okay, we're talking about Erev Tchumen. If a person wants to establish their shvisa, their place of residence in an area that is beyond where they're actually staying at the beginning of Shabbos, so they put some food in an area that is beyond where they actually are, and from the place where the food is, that's where you have a 2,000 amma radius around which you can travel on Shabbos. We're not talking about carrying anything, we're talking about just traveling stam. Okay, so you have to have access to the food. The Mishnah says, Nasnu ba'migdal. Let's say you place food in some kind of box closet, far away from you, but you lost the key. So Tanakama says, Harav, ERU. That's still nevertheless an ERU. We're going to see in the Gemara. The reason why is because in some way you still have access to the food, despite the fact that you lost the key. Rabbi Eliezer, however, says, if you don't know the place in which the key resides, Eino ERU. It's not a good ERU because he thinks you don't have access to the food. Fine. We're going to elaborate on what that machlokas is about. The Gemara says, why would the Tanakama think that it's totally fine? Essentially, he and his food are in different domains. He doesn't have access to the food. End of story. Shouldn't be a good Erev Tchumen. Rav Shmuel. So Rav and Shmuel, the Amrei Tarvayu, they both say, Hacha b'migdal shel leveina maskinan. We're dealing with an enclosure that contains this food. We're dealing with a pile of stones that are not actually cemented to each other. And if I was to take them apart, it wouldn't actually be a malacha of stira at all. Rabbi Meir here, and this is the viewpoint, the Tanakama would reflect the viewpoint of Rabbi Meir. The Amar Poches Lechatchila Venotel. He says that you'd be allowed to take apart even Lechatchila. If you want to access the food, you can remove the bricks, and you can take that food.
You mean it's somehow locked, but you could just...
So it's not really locked.
Meaning you take it apart.
Yeah, you're taking it apart. You're taking it apart. That's what you would be doing. The Tanan, for we learned in a Mishnah, this is the original case in which these concepts appear. Let's say I have an enclosure that is sealed shut. It has food in it. But then afterwards it collapses. The building breaks in some way or another. So So you are allowed, according to the Tanakama, to take the food out from inside. We would not. What the Tanakama is trying to get across is we would not suggest that the food is muktzah since coming into Shabbos I don't have any access to it. We would not say that. So once the building breaks down, you can access the food, but they would not tell you lechatchila, the Tanakama, to destroy this structure. Rabbi Meir says, no, you can take it down lechatchila. Everybody agrees, background of what's going on here, everybody agrees that it would not be stira to take this apart. It's just a stack of rocks, really. The only concern would be, these are bricks. These bricks are muktzah. So the Tanakama would not allow you to compromise on muktzah. They would only allow you access to the food if those bricks are somehow become out of the way later on. Rabbi Meir, however, would say, no, you can remove those rocks lechatchila to get to the food. It's not an issue. Okay, so the Gemara says, "V'ha'amar Rav Nachman bar Ada Amar Shmuel." But didn't Rav Nachman bar Ada, in the name of Shmuel, say Bavir delivnei that case is unique? That's dealing with a stack of bricks, whereas in our Mishnah at the moment the Gemara does not think it's talking about a stack of bricks. So the Gemara says, "No, Hakanami Bavir delivnei." No, here too we are in fact talking about a stack of bricks, not cemented shut. The same concerns. Say,
why would you lock an enclosed box that you could just take apart?
There would be a door-like structure that's much easier to open than actually lifting off the bricks, and that area was locked. Right? Why practically would you do it? It's not for security purposes. It doesn't seem so secure. Good question. Not sure. Okay. We're dealing with what people do, whether they have a good reason or not. It doesn't matter. We're talking about what the halacha is for people that do such things. So now, the Gemara says, "B'ha'amar Rabbi Zera," but didn't Rabbi Zera say Yom Tov Amru that this case is only with regards to Yom Tov, aval lo b'Shabbos, not the case on Shabbos. On Shabbos, everybody would be in agreement that you can't compromise on Hilchos Muktzah to get to this food. So say, "Hakanami b'Yom Tov." Yeah, here too it's a case of Yom Tov. The Tanakama in our Mishnah that says your food is accessible and therefore you have a good Erev Tchumen, they would say that that's because you can on Yom Tov take apart this box and get to the food. Rabbi Eliezer would say that you can't. He would say that you can't take this apart. The Gemara says, but wait, what you just set up is not going to work with the Mishnah because we have a brisa that deals with this Mishnah and it elaborates and it says the following. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, the Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah who says you cannot access that food and therefore you don't have Erev Tchumen, says, Im ba'ir avad, let's say the key that I lost, if I lost it in the city, ERU Erev, your Erev is good. We're going to explain why that matters in a few lines. Im basada avad, but if it was in the field in which you lost the key, in ERU Erev, then your Erev is no good. Okay, fine. But apparently there's Hotzah concerns somewhere here. If my key is in the Sada, I can't bring it to the box because of Hotzah. So that's why Rabbi Eliezer would not allow it if you found the key in Rosh Hashanah Sada. But now the Gemara says Iba Yom Tov. But if you're claiming that our Mishnah is dealing with the case of Yom Tov, there is no malacha of Hotzah in Yom Tov. So Mali Ir Mali Sada. Why does it matter where the key is, whether it's in the city or whether it's in the fields? Okay, now Rosh Hashanah Aleph. So we say Chasrei Mechsara v'Haki Katani. Some of the text is missing, and it should read as follows. This price. So let's explain it more fully. Just an important point to make. Chasrei Mechsara does not mean a corruption of the text in some way or another. It means, at least according to the mainstream opinion of what this term means, it means that Chazal chose to write it in a deficient way, but in a way in which you would understand that something fishy is going on, and then people that were learned in terms of the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara, they would be able to figure out what it really means.
They did it on purpose.
They did it on purpose to, I think, give Torah Shabbal Peh still that Torah Shabbal Peh flavor to it. We're writing down as little as necessary, and we're making it obscure in some ways also to require an oral tradition to be able to figure things out.
Or a Rabbi to teach.
Or a Rabbi to teach it, yeah.
I think it's complicated.
There are some viewpoints that say Chasrei Mechsara just means there's a corruption of the text. But I tell you,
give you whatever you get.
My understanding is that the majority view is that Chasrei Mechsara is an intentional lacking in the text. Anyways, and this is what the Brisa really means. What we're about to say. Let's say you put your food into this closet type thing, and you locked it up. And then you lost the key. So Tam and Kama says it's still an ERU, like we mentioned before. You can really take apart this entire structure, so it's not an issue. But what are we talking about? By Yom Tov. Only on Yom Tov are we going to relax the restrictions on Muktzah to access that food. So that's where it's okay. But on Shabbos we're not going to be making with Hilchos Muktzah, and therefore your ERU is not going to be good because you don't have any access to the food. Okay. Nimtza hamaftech, but let's say on Shabbos, where we said you don't have access to the food, but I have a key now. Now I found the key. So bein be'ir, bein basada, ein eruv eruv. Still no good because whether your key is in the city or in the field, your eruv is no good. The assumption we're going to see in a few moments is at least the Tanna Kama thinks there's no way to get that key to the box. Right? We're talking about a city that does not have an eruv, right? The other kind of eruv.
What about the key belt?
If you had a key belt, great. But we're talking about somebody that doesn't.
You lost it.
If you have no way to get the key to your box, so that's why this is not a good ERU. You still don't have access to the food.
Even if
that's Tanna Kama.
In a city that has an ERU, how can you get it out to the place where the food is, which is outside? No.
The food is outside.
No,
we're talking right. So what we're talking about is I live in city X. I want to establish my shvisa, my eruv tchumen, in a different city that is further away. My key was found in that city.
Where's the food?
The food is in that city. I'm here at the onset of Yom Tov. Right?
Within 2,000 hours.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so that is the Tanna Kama's opinion. No matter where you find the key, too bad. Because you can't get the key to the box. Rabbi Eliezer says, Be'ir eruv eruv. In the city, if you find the key, it's good. You can get the key to the box, and therefore you have access to the food. It's fine. Balsada ein eruv eruv. But in the fields, it's not so. Let's figure out exactly why. Be'ir eruv eruv ka Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Eliezer says that when the key is found in the city, it's a good eruv in line with what Rabbi Shimon says. The Amar, Rabbi Shimon says, Echad gagos vecha chatzeros vecha karfifos rishus achas hein lakilim sheshav sebesochan. I have various areas that are different kinds of rishus hayachid. Within a city, they're all contiguous, but they're different kinds of rishus hayachid. I have a roof that can get me to a fenced-in field, and that can get me to a karpef. Rabbi Shimon paskins that even though they're all different halachic rishuyos hayachid, still you can transfer between those rishuyos hayachid, and therefore, if you have a route by which the key can travel to get to the box, you're fine. So that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Therefore, if you find the key in the city, meaning you find the key in the city and you have a way, according to Rabbi Shimon, to get it to the box, you're okay.
Or you get your dog to make
Those are different cheshbonos. Basada ein eruv eruv. However, if you found it in the field in Rosh Hashanah, there's no way to get this key. Even Rabbi Eliezer would agree to this. There's no way to get the key to the box, so then it's no good. The word kirabanan, not so clear. It should be there. The Bach actually says get rid of this entire line. It makes it a little bit more difficult to understand. We'll skip it for now. So that is all one approach to our Mishnah. One approach to our Mishnah is we're dealing with, again, this stack of bricks that is enclosing my food, and we're dealing with Yom Tov. So now the Tanakama, just to flesh out all the ideas in the Mishnah, the Tanakama said, your Erev is fine, I don't care that you've lost the key, because you can take apart this box. Rabbi Eliezer does not think you can take apart the box, because he respects Muktzah, and he doesn't think it should be compromised in this situation. And he would tell you, so if you find the key, okay, but it depends on where you find the key. That's one approach to what our Mishnah means. Second approach now. Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef say the following: the structure in which my Erev Tchumen, my food is in, is a large wooden box. Okay, fine. Demar Savar Klihu. One opinion holds that this large wooden box has the status of a kli. Ve'ein binyan b'kelim, ein stira b'kelim. There's no concept of bona or stira with regards to kelim, and therefore you'd be, according to the Tanakama, you could take apart this box even without a key, totally fine. Just want to point out, la halacha, the concept of ein stira b'kelim, that I can destroy any kli I want, is not so simple. If I wanted to make this Gemara square with what we pass in la halacha, let's presume that this box is poorly constructed. Okay, something like that. Then we would say that you could maybe destroy it, but don't just assume that any kli can be destroyed on Shabbos. We would invoke stira sometimes. Okay, but that's the Tanakama's opinion. Umar Savar, the other opinion holds, Ohelhu. No, that box is not considered a kli. That's a large enough box that it's considered actually a structure. And then for sure stira applies. You couldn't destroy it to get to the food. That would be Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. And this would be the same machlokas. This machlokas would plug into another machlokas tanaim, the Tanan we learned in the Mishnah, with regards to a zav or a nida, somebody that's tameh.
Rabbi, what is this word? You keep using the word stira. I don't quite.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stira means destruction. Destruction. It's one of the 39 malachos.
Not contradiction. It's stira.
Right. So it also can mean stira in the Gemara. Very often means a contradiction. Stira is one of the malachos on Shabbos. You cannot destroy a structure. And right now we're invoking a principle that, with regards to a large wooden box, perhaps it wouldn't be called the malacha of stira to take it apart to get to the food inside. My apologies. Should have translated. Okay, but now we're saying that same machlokas, whether or not this is a kli, in which case there'd be no stira, there'd be no destruction, or if it's considered an ohel, a structure, which would be a problem to destroy. That same machlokas applies in the following case. I have a zav or a zava, and hikesh al gabe shida teva umigdal. Let's say they hit some kind of large type of wooden box. These are all three different terms that mean different kinds of wooden boxes, large ones. So if they were to move it, there's a kind of tumah that's transmitted called tumat hesed. If they move an item, even if they didn't touch it with their actual skin, let's say they're wearing gloves or something. So then, if they moved it, it would become tameh. So tamein, that's the halakha according to the Tanakama. They moved that box. Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Shimon metarin. Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Shimon, however, they say it's tahar. So now, that's the end quote of the Mishnah. Now we suggest, my lav b'hakim iflugi is the machlok is not about the following. Mar savar klihu. One opinion holds that this large box has the status of a kli, and therefore when it's moved, kelim can be makabel tama, and therefore that's why these things become tameh. Umar savar oelhu, the other opinion holds that no, this is a large box, it's not treated like a kli, it's treated like a structure, and these structures apparently are not makabel tama. Okay, that's the suggestion of what our Mishnah is about. Our Mishnah is about you treat this box that the food is in like a kli, and therefore you could destroy it, you could access the food. You have a good Erev Tchumen. Or do I say, no, this is a structure that I can't destroy, and therefore unless I have the key, I can't get to the food, and I don't have an Erev Tchumen. But now Amar Abaye says, V'tispera, are you really going to apply that machlokas about kelim, not kelim, to this idea about azav and nida? But we learned in a brayso the following: ohel v'nisei tameh. Let's say I have a tent, something which is for sure a structure, and somebody that's azav or something moves that item. Yes, that tent becomes tameh as well. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's a kli. Kli ve'eno nisei, and if it's a kli, but it wasn't actually moved, it was just, let's say, touched by a zav that was wearing a glove. Let's say, so then it would be tahor, not a problem. So it seems like tumah v'tar of tumas hesed has nothing to do with whether it's a structure or a kli. The katani seif, and also I have the seif of this prices says as follows: Ve'im hayu nisotin tamein. If there were to be anything that's moved is tameh. Zehaklal. Here's the following general rule: Niset machmas kocho tameh. If it is moved by his actual force, it is tameh. Machmas ra'ada tahor. But if it just comes as a secondary movement, the guy hits a table, and that happens to shake some item, that item does not get tumas hesed. Okay. Ella Amar Abaye says, so really this machlokas before about a large box touched by a zav, moved by a zav, it has nothing to do with whether this is considered a kli or a structure. Rabbi says, rather, what's the machlokas about? The kol yama hesed machmas kocho tame. Everybody agrees that no matter what, whether it's a kli or a structure, if a zav actually moves it with his own personal force, the item becomes tameh. Machmas ra'ada tahor, and if it's again just a secondary vibration, so then it's going to become it's not going to become tameh. It's tahor. V'hacha barada machmas kocho askinan. This brisa is dealing with the machlokes is whether if I intentionally move something, but secondarily, the zav's intention is to move this pencil, and he bangs on the table really hard. He doesn't touch the pencil itself, but he bangs on the table. Is that considered hesed? So that's the machlokes. The Mar Savar have a hesed. One opinion holds the Tanakama would say that it is hesed. Umar Savar lo have a hesed. The other opinion would hold that no, that's not considered tamas hesed. The pencil would still be tar. Okay.
If it's keli and oil.
Right, and irrespective whether it's a clear or an oil. So now that we've done that, the reason we brought all this up, by the way, was to try to figure out what's going on in our Mishnah. So Abaye, if you just destroyed that approach, what's your alternative? What's our Mishnah about? Abaye v'Rava d'Amri Tarvayev. So Abaye and Rava both say the following: B'minol v'katir b'masna askinan. We're dealing with a box that my erev tchumen is in. My food is there. It is locked, and that lock is fastened to a rope that is tied around my box. In order to, the typical way of opening this box would be to undo the lock, and then the ropes come off, and then I open the box. That's what we're dealing with. If you don't have the key, what's the way? What do you need to open it? You need a knife to cut open that rope. So Tanakama Savar like Rabbi Yossi. The Tanakama who says that you're fine even without the key, you still have access to the food, you still have an erev tchumen, that's holding like Rabbi Yossi. The Amar Kol HaKelim Nitan B'Shabbos Chutz Mimasar HaGodol V'Yosei Shel Chamacharesha. Rabbi Yossi thinks that all kelim, all functional tools, can be moved on Shabbos. They're not muktzah, except for a saw, a large saw, or the blade of a hoe. That's not something that the details of why those are problematic. We're not going to get into. That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Therefore, I have the option of getting my kitchen knife, taking it to this box, cutting the rope, and getting to my food. So my erev tchumen is good, even without the key. Rabbi Eliezer savar like Rabbi Nechemia. Rabbi Eliezer, however, holds like Rabbi Nechemia in Hilchos Muktzah. The Amar afilu talis afilu tarvad ein nitalan ela letzorech tashmishan. This is a very machmir view of Hilchos Muktzah that we do not paskin like. That even a talis, even a spoon, something which is clearly a functional item on Shabbos, you could use it for mutter purposes. You can only use it for that mutter purpose. The purpose that, I shouldn't say mutter, the purpose that is designated for. Right? I would only be allowed to use a spoon for the typical use of a spoon. I would only be allowed to use my knife in my kitchen to cut food. I would not be able to take it to the box to cut open a rope. Therefore, according to Rabbi Eliezer, you have no option, no mutter way to access this box, and therefore the only way to get to it is with a key. If you don't have the key, you don't have an erev tchumen, and you're messed up. Okay, that's the second approach basically to this mission.
If you have a string around the box, it has a cake in it on Shabbos, you're not allowed to take a knife and cut the string.
So if you're dealing, so again, we don't paskin like the shita of muktzah.
According to this, that's what he's saying.
According to Rabbi Nechemia, you would not be allowed to, unless you have a knife that's designated for such purposes. Okay. Mishnah, next Mishnah. Nisgalgal chutz l'tchum. Let's say again, I'm trying to set up an erev tchumen. Prior to Shabbos beginning, I set it up at the limit of. I set it up. I don't know, not at the limit. I set it up in area X, but then it rolls beyond the 2,000 amos that I currently reside in at the onset of Shabbos. Right, so it moved. Therefore, it's too far. It's too far away for me to get to it. Right, if I'm in area X here, my erev tchumen. My tchumen, if I was here, would be 2,000 amos. I'm saying it in a confusing way. Let me say it more simply. I'm over here. I made my erev tchumen over here. So my shvisa is where I put my erev tchumen. That gives me a 2,000 amma radius. But since it rolled over here, now that 2,000 amma radius is outside of where I actually am at the onset of Shabbos. So I can't get there.
It's beyond the tchum.
The erev tchumen is my tchum, right. And it ends up being beyond where I am. So I can't get to that zone in the first place.
That 2,000 amma radius moves with the thing.
Where he puts
it moves where the food is.
Not where he is. The tchum is from 2,000 radius around where the food.
It means that it roll. Whatever way it got there is fine.
You're living there. So 2,000
it means roll.
We don't know, right?
But you now are over here, which is more than 2,000 away. You can't get to your residence.
Yeah, I think it's just an example. Really, we're talking about any time your erev tchumen moves.
Or if a wind blows it.
Yeah, we're definitely a wind. We're going to see that explicitly, actually.
So we've had occasions where if it comes out when sunset hits, and it's already established, even if it's gone by Shabbos.
Correct.
Still
we're talking right now about if it moved prior to Shabbos beginning. Right. Once Shabbos begins, at that moment in time, freeze it, where the Erev Tchumen was, that is my Tchum. Irrespective of whether it moves afterwards, I eat it, right? That's actually the whole purpose of it, is be like, look, I live here, I can eat this stuff. So if you eat it, it's totally fine. But we're talking about where it moved prior to the onset of Shabbos, meaning the actual boundaries that it established are different because it was in a different zone when Shabbos began.
You wouldn't know that.
So you'll find out later. Yeah, or somebody lets you know.
No, 1 second. You didn't know if it moved before Shabbos or Ben Ishmashes.
The Mishnah's going to deal with that. I don't know. Right, so what about Suffolk? The Mishnah's going to deal with that. Okay.
This was Dr. Lippman's question before. He wanted to know why you would build a box or protect it so that this shouldn't happen.
I would imagine.
Isn't that the idea?
Also, so nobody else eats your food.
Or no one else eats your
Well,
food.
maybe it was there before Shabbos.
Animals, anything.
That was his question.
Okay, so back to, let's start again from the Mishnah. Let's say the food that you had set up moved. And then it's, so to speak, beyond the area that you can reach it. Nafal alav gal, or let's say a pile of stones fell on top of it and now it's not accessible. Or nisraf, or it burned, just totally disappeared. So truma v'nitmeis mibod yom. Let's say you're a Hacohen, you made your erev tchumen out of truma, and then it became tameh, so you can't eat it anymore. And that all of those things, if they happen mibod yom and it's still Friday, ain't no erev. Your erev doesn't help you. Misha chashecha, but however, if any of these things happen after nightfall already set in, Shabbos began and it was in its fine spot, Harry's erev, it's fine. In Suffolk, let's say you don't know, which is very likely. You have no idea what happened to this, when it happened. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda Omrim, Harizeh Chamar Gamal. They say that this is a case of donkey camel. What does that mean? If I have a donkey, the way I lead it is by I'm walking behind it. If I'm leading a camel, I lead it ahead. I'm ahead of it when I'm walking. So you're stuck between. If I was bringing both someplace, I would be sandwiched between them, right? I would be behind the donkey, which is leading. I would be in front of the camel, which is behind me. It's an interesting way of saying that if you're a Masupah, my shvi. Somebody said that in the earlier DAF too. So my where I was before Shabbos was here. Before Shabbos began was here. I made my erev tchumen over here. It definitely rolled over here beyond an area that's too far away. But I'm not sure if that happened before Shabbos, in which case I'm in trouble. This is not a good erev. Or if it was after Shabbos, in which case the shvisa is in this area. I don't know what happened. So if you were to make like a Venn diagram, so to speak, of the two things, the area that's overlapped, that's what you're stuck in. You have to assume the worst in both situations. You'd be stuck in between two zones. Okay. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon are in Suffolk erev kasher. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say no. Anytime you're in a situation of that, you can assume lakula, you can assume your erev was totally fine. Where that erev tchumen is, that's your shvisa.
But the only way to discover that is to actually be mechalel, or potentially be mechalel.
No, so let's talk about, I get there.
Yes.
On Yom Tov, or Shabbos, whatever it is. And then I find, wait, that's not where I left it. Right? So, Rebbe...
You've already walked.
Yeah, but you can't help it. You didn't know.
No, so you didn't know, but then there are practical halachos. So let's say I find myself outside a tchum, right? So I'm only allowed to walk Arba Amos from where I find myself. So the moment you notice that, you'd be stuck. There are practical implications, even if I find out after the fact. Okay. Well, what are we up to here? Right, so they say that you can assume the best. You could assume that the erev tchumen is fine. It was in the spot where it was earlier, that you had set it up before Shabbos began, or it wasn't burned before Shabbos. You could assume the best. I'm Rabbi Yossi. Avtulmas hayid mishum chamisha zakenim al safek erev shekasher. Rabbi Yossi reinforces what he says. I know that Avtulmas, apparently a much more ancient and respected authority, he said in front of 5 zakenim who agreed with him that safek erev is kasher. That's why he maintains his opinion. Okay. The Gemara says, this gagol chutzot tchum, right? Our Mishnah mentioned something that rolls outside of the area that you would put it in. Amar Rava, Rava says, lo shanu ela shenis gagol chutz arba amos. That's only if it rolled more than 4 amos away from that edge where you left it. About letoch arba amos, but if it was still within 4 amos, it just fell over a little bit. Hanosin iruvo yesho arba amos. The area that you actually establish as your shvisa with your erev tchumen, it has a 4 amma radius no matter what. And if that 4 amma radius reaches your 2,000 amos from the beginning of Shabbos, so then everything is still mixed and everything is fine. We're only talking when it moves to a significant distance. Okay.
4 amos work that it's in the middle of the 4 amos, or any part is 4 amos?
4 amma radius around the food.
So it's got to be in the middle of the 4 amos, which really means...
What do you mean by the middle?
4 amos around means really from one side to the other is 8 amos.
Yeah.
So can you argue that take the circle that's around the food and give it 8 amos,
yeah,
because it's on one side,
right,
that 4 amos circle?
No, but I care about my personal tchum, 2,000 amos away from where I began Shabbos. So if that reaches, one edge of it, I'm fine.
I'm arguing that it should be 8 amos.
The 8 amos in one direction? No, so that we don't say. No, it's only a 4 amos radius. Okay. Further in the Gemara, Nafal alav gal, if a heap of stones fell upon it, we said that would ruin an eruv. I'm not entirely. It doesn't read so well into the following words, and I'll tell you how Rashi explains this line. He said, we would have thought initially that the case is as follows, that if you wanted, and Rashi would say from a da'araisa perspective, I don't want to do any malachos da'araisa, that I would be allowed to take this apart. That the only problem is, let's say, tiltul muktzah. Only that my only concern is derabanan, and the Mishnah would still be telling you, you can't access that food. Okay, and then therefore it's not a good eruv tchumen. So lema masnisin de lo Rabbi. That would let us suggest that this Mishnah therefore is arguing on Rabbi. The Rabbi, if it's like Rabbi, Ha'amar, Rabbi said himself, Kol davar shu mishum shavus. If the barrier to my the food I want to get is midirabanan only, lo gazu ala ben hashmashos. Then during ben hashmashos we allow you to do tiltal muktzah. And therefore, we would allow you to access the food at the onset of Shabbos, and your eruv should still be good, right? If the only thing getting in my way of accessing the food is the fact there's a big heap of stones on it, at Ben Hashmashos, the onset of what we practically observe as Shabbos, so I would still be allowed to remove the stones. So I have access to this eruv. So our Mishnah nevertheless says that you don't have access to the eruv, so it's a machlokas. So we say no. Afilu temek Rabbi. Our Mishnah can even be in line with what Rabbi says. And lo tzricha daboy mara v'chatzina. We're talking about a case where my food is covered with stones to the extent that in order to get to it, I would need a shovel and a pick. I would have to do significant excavating, and that would be possibly malachos of bona, or steer a building or destroying something. And therefore, we're dealing with da'araises that are getting in the way of my access of this food. Okay. And now we're going to get into why we need all these different elements in the Mishnah. You could have just left it as a catch-all. If I don't have access to the eruv, no good. The Gemara is going to tell us why each and every example is needed. B'tzricha, you need all of them. If you had only taught when it rolled outside of your zone, I would say that's because it's on your zone anymore. But I would have said, if you hadn't told me otherwise, that a heap of stones falls upon it, I would say, no, my eruv is still good. It's still in my zone. Okay, fine, I can't get to it. So therefore, the Mishnah comes to teach you, no, that's also a problem. I would have thought maybe that's an eruv, but not so. If you had only taught the Mishnah when stones fall upon it, I'd say mishub the michse. The reason why my eruv is no good is because it's covered. I can't get to it. Haval nisgalgel. If it just rolled outside of my zone, I would say zinin da'asi zika umaisi. Maybe the wind would come and blow it back my way, and therefore I could get to it. So I should say my eruv is good. So ima lehave eruv. I would say maybe it should be a fine eruv. That's not the case, and therefore you have to mention in the Mishnah all of these cases are elements that would invalidate my eruv tchumen. Okay. Onus of truma of an itma. We had 2 more items in the Mishnah. If my truma my food burns, totally gone. Or if it was truma and Hacohen and it became tummy, so I can't eat it anymore. So we have all those cases as well. So lama li tana nisaf. Why is our Mishnah going out of the way to teach burning? Doesn't seem to be teaching anything new. So they say, no, lohodiacha kocha de Rabbi Yossi. It's to teach the strength of Rabbi Yossi's kula. Rabbi Yossi mentioned earlier a suffix about when these various things happen to my eruv, that I can assume the best. Right? So Rabbi Yossi says that even when I'm dealing with an item, it's totally gone. No idea where it is. Rabbi Yossi would still say it's fine. Tana truma v'nitmei sadicha kocha de Rabbi Meir. And we taught the case of truma that gets invalidated to teach you the chumrah of Rabbi Meir. Even in a suffix in that case, I would assume the worst. The reason why truma is the biggest chiddush is because I would have thought to assume that the food retains its chazaka of being tahor until I'm shown otherwise. Right? So Rabbi Meir would say, no, even in that case I would assume the worst. I would not assume that it was tahor before Shabbos, Shabbos began. Okay. But now we say, V'sav Rabbi Meir sveika l'chumra. Does that mean to say, our Mishnah seems to say, Rabbi Meir holds that in the suffix we paskin l'chumra, even on a din d'Rabbanan like eruv tchumen. But we learned in a Mishnah, and it's an important rule to know, sta mishnayos. Mishnayos that don't actually, we don't say who this is the viewpoint of. That is the view of Rabbi Meir. So now we're basically asking on Rabbi Meir from Rabbi Meir himself. Tameh sheyarad litbol. Somebody that's tameh, he goes into a mikveh to immerse himself, to become tahor. Safek tavel, safek lo tavel. Let's say he doesn't know whether he was tovel properly. He's not sure if every limb was under there at the exact same moment, something like that. Vafilu tavel. Safek tavel ba'arba'im sa, safek lo tavel ba'arba'im sa. Let's say he knows he went incorrectly, but he's not sure if the mikveh had the requisite amount of water. B'chein shnei mikvahos ba'achas. Or if, right, let's say I have 2 mikvahos. Yesh ba'arba'im sa. One of them has 40 sa, the right amount of water. The other doesn't. He doesn't know which one's which. He went in one. He doesn't know which one he went into. Later on, somebody, I guess, lets him know, one of those mikvahs is no good. So Sveiko Tameh. So in that case, we assume this guy is still Tameh. He has to do Tevila again. So we say, when is that said? B'tumah Chamura. When we're dealing with Tumah De'oraisa, Rashi says. The Torah says, I get. So far, no problems. Rabbi Meir says, Safek Tameh in both cases, fine. But if we're dealing with Tumakala, more lighter Tumah, Rashi says, the Rabbanan Tumah. Kagon Sha'achal Ochlin Tamein. Let's say a person eats this is talking really about a very specific case. Let's say a person eats Tamei Truma. He becomes Tamei Midirabanan. B'shasa Mashkin Tamein. He drinks Truma drink, so that's also, he becomes Tamei Midirabanan. B'habo Rosho V'ruba V'mayim She'uvin. Somebody, again, this is a more specific case, and it sounds like we're talking about somebody who's a Tavul Yom, somebody who's just awaiting the passing of the night in order to be Tahar. So if that person immerses himself, finds part of his body immersed in drawn water that's no good for a mikvah, the Rabbanan didn't say, not only does it not make you Tahar, it actually makes you Tamei Midei Rabbanan. So Od Shenafal Al Roshav Aruba Shlosha Lugan Mayim She'uvin. Or again, talking about a Tavul Yom, and a certain amount of drawn water falls on him. Again, Midei Rabbanan he's Tamei. Bayir Litbo. So let's say one of these people. This whole list is basically a list of people that are Tamei Midei Rabbanan only. If you have one of these people, Bayir Litbo, and he goes down to do Tevila to get rid of this Tamei Rabbanan. Safek Tavel, Safek Lo Tavel. He's not sure if he went in properly. But Filo Tavel, Safek Tavel Arba Msa, Safek Lo Tavel Arba Msa. Or he knows he was Tovel properly, but he doesn't know if the mikveh had the right amount of water. Or let's say he goes into a mikveh, he's not, and there are two mikvahs there. One has the right amount of water, one doesn't. But Tavel B'achas Mehan, he goes in one. Ve'ni Yodeya Be'izim Mehan Tavel. He's not sure which one he went into. In all those cases, Seiko Tahar. Rabbi Meir would say that in those cases the suffix is Torah. Now we have our question, right? Earlier we said Rabbi Meir assumes the worst about the food that the Kohen set aside for his Erev Tchumen. It becomes Tameh. We assume it became Tameh before Shabbos even began. He's assuming L'chumra. Here, with regards to Adin Derabanan, Tumah Derabanan, he's assuming L'kula. So that's our question. Just to finish off the Brisa, Rabbi Yossi Metame. Rabbi Yossi says it's all Tameh in any event. Okay, but the steer between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Meir. So we say no. Kasab Rabbi Meir Tchumen De'araisa Ninhu. Rabbi Meir holds that Tchumen is De'araisa. We don't pass in this way, but that's what Rabbi Meir felt. And therefore, if he's passing L'chumra, it's because of the De'araisa L'chumra. Whereas in the case of Tumah earlier, where he's passing L'kula, that's because that's Tumah Derabanan. Here we're dealing with Tchumen De'araisa. So now we question that though. V'saber Rabbi Meir Tchumen De'araisa. Does Rabbi Meir really hold that Tchumen is De'araisa? V'hatanan, but we learned in a Mishnah. Just a little background before we get into this Mishnah. If I'm trying to establish how the length of 2,000 amos for Tchumen purposes, so I would have thought, naturally that I would do 2,000 amos that I have to walk. Right? So if I have a large hill, a large mountain, it doesn't matter that vertically the mountain only spans, let's say, 1,500 amos. If I have to walk, because I'm going on an incline and then a decline, I have to walk 2,000 amos, I would have thought that's 2,000 amos. Right? But with the... Right, but...
As the crow flies kind of thing.
Yes, I like that term. Very good. As the crow flies. Whereas, but that's not the case. With regards to certain laws of Tchumen, we're going to measure based on how the crow flies, not how much I would have to actually walk. So now let's learn that right now. A Mishnah that talks about it. Let's say you had a 50, the context is, you have a 50 amma rope, and that is meant to do my measuring of has the crow flies of my mountain. So Amar Rabbi Dustai, and it's not able to make it. The mountain is so big that even a 50 amma rope is not getting me there. Amar Rabbi Dustai by Yanai Mishum Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Dustai said in the name of Rabbi Meir. That's significant. Rabbi Meir, again, he's the person we're focusing on. Shamati, I heard, Rabbi Meir said, Shemekadin Baharim, that we pierce through the whole mountain. Meaning, even when you're dealing with a mountain so large, we measure as the crow flies. Right? You go straight through it. Okay. Now, end quote of the Mishnah. Now, if you maintain, as we just did a few lines ago, that Rabbi Meir thinks Tchumen is Daraisa, how on earth can you do this process of just piercing through the mountain? Rav Nachman said named Rabbi Baravua the following: There are a couple of other halachos in which we measure distance. One of them is Ari Miklat. I have to make sure Ari Miklat have a certain distance near each other. And Egla Arufa, when there's a murder that I don't know who did it, I have to figure out which is the nearest city. So in those cases, when I'm trying to measure distances to cities, I don't go by as the crow flies. And what's the reason why? They say, These are Dinei Da'araisa. When you're dealing with Dinei Da'araisa, you have to work with how much you travel on foot. Okay, so the rule, it seems like, is when I'm dealing with Da'araisa Dinim, I can't do this how the crow flies business. If Rabbi Meir thinks Tchumen is Daraisa, how can he have said earlier that I do how the crow flies stuff? Say lo kasha, not a stira. Hadidei, with regards to the laws of Tchumen, he personally holds Tchumen is Daraisa. He would not allow you to do this as the crow flies thing at all. Rabbi, whereas when he said earlier that you could, that was in accordance with the opinion of some of his Rebbeim. The Gemara says, Dikanami, you could actually infer that itself from his own words. The Katani Bazu, what did we say earlier? Amar Rabbi Dustai Bar Yanai Mishum Rabbi Meir, we quoted Rabbi Meir as saying, Shamati, I heard, Shemekadin Baharim, that some say that you can pierce through the mountain, but he personally didn't hold to that. He said, I heard that. Some people say you could do that. Shmamina, good proof, right? Rabbi Meir does in fact hold Tchumen as Da'araisa. And again, why are we talking about all that? We're trying to understand why in the Mishnah Rabbi Meir assumes the Chumrah with regards to Tchumen. I don't know whether the stuff that happened to my food happened before Shabbos, in which I'm in trouble, or it happened after Shabbos, in which I'm okay. Rabbi Meir holds the Chumrah because he thinks Tchumen is Da'araisa. Fine. Now, Varami Da'araisa Rabbi Meir. But now I have a contradiction between what to do in Da'araisa cases for Rabbi Meir that I'll pose to you. The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Noga be'achad balayla. Let's say one of your friends is sleeping outside at night, and you want to just give him a good night tap. See you later. He doesn't move. You think, okay, he's sleeping. You assume he was alive, but you're not sure. Then the next morning you find out, he's actually dead. So when I touched him last night, when did he die? Am I tamei in case he was and he was dead when I touched him, or did he not die until later and I'm tahar? Rabbi Meir metahar. Rabbi Meir says, despite the suffix here, it's a din da'araisa, tumah da'araisa. Rabbi Meir says, despite the fact that it's a suffix, he's matar. He says we're mekel. Right? There's our question right there. The Chachamim metamin. The Chachamim, however, say it's a problem. Shekol atmeos kashas mitziyasan. Anytime you find yourself in a shayla, you have to assume that it was the worst. Like how you just found him, you have to assume that's what it was. Before. When you touched him. Right. At the time that you touched him, you have to assume that he was dead according to the Chachamim. But again, what's our question? Rabbi Meir here is paskening the kula on a din da'araisa of tama, whereas earlier we just said in a din da'araisa of tchumen. Wait, what's the question?
It's machmir.
Sorry, he's machmir here. No, he's makil here and he's machmir there. Right. Okay. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says Mishnasinu, our Mishnah in which Rabbi Meir paskins lekula. Sorry. No. Lechumra again. Our Mishnah is Shahaya Alei Sheretz Kol Ben Hashmashas. When there was a sheretz lying on my food, on my truma food, my truma erev tchumen, throughout Ben Hashmashas, and therefore I know it was tamei before the onset of Shabbos. The Gemara says, no, that can't be. If that's so, Behal Lema Rabbi Yossi Safek Erev Kasher. In our Mishnah, we definitely pose this as a case of Safek. Rabbi Yossi said, in the Safek of this case, of the Truma becoming Tameh, we assume that it's kasher, but this doesn't sound like a suffix at all the way you're playing it, that the sheretz is there the entire time. So Rabbi Rav Yosef, Dami Tarvayu, alternatively, Rabbi Rav Yosef say a different answer. We're dealing with a unique kind of suffix. I have two different groups of witnesses that are saying different things. One group is saying, we saw a sheretz fall on this truma erev tchumen food. They don't seem to have anything better to do, they're just watching food all day. And they say, we saw the sheretz fall into the food before Shabbos. Therefore, you Kohen, your erev tchumen, no good. You couldn't eat it before Shabbos even began. But another group says, no, from nightfall. That's when the problem arose, but as Shabbos came in, your erev tchumen was totally fine. So in that case, you have a unique suffix that has nothing to do with chazakos. Right? I don't talk about the chazaka. Oh well, this was tahor before I was introduced to this issue, so I assume the best. There's no suffix. There's no chazakos when you're dealing with testimony. Once testimony gets involved, all bets are off. So Rava says, Hassam, over there in the case of touching the guy that might have been dead at night when he was, so to speak, sleeping. So Trei Chazaki Lekula. Rabbi Meir is paskening the Kula because you have two Chazakos in your favor. Chazaka one is that I, the toucher, am tahor before I touch him for sure. Right? That's Chazaka one. And number two, people are generally alive until they're shown to be dead. So those two Chazakos help me out, and the Rabbi Meir is going to pasken the Kula there, despite the fact that we're dealing with a suffix in daraisa. But in our... No, I got this right. Whereas in our Mishnah, chada chazaka l'kula, you only have one chazaka l'kula. You only have one chazaka of this thing was tahor at least up to a certain point in time. My truma, my erev tchumen. I don't know when it became tamei, if it was before or after Shabbos. But I don't have, but the sheretz or whatever that was tamei that touched it, I know is for sure tamei. So I only have one chazaka, and therefore in my suffix in that case I'm going to pass in l'chumra.